Hi everyone. Today's presentation is going to be about political cartoons, thinking beyond the image and interpreting the artwork. This presentation is intended for those teachers that are interested in using political cartoons more in their classrooms and those teachers that need a little bit more of assistance helping their students to actually understand political cartoons. Now, before we can actually use them in a classroom, both the teacher and the student need to understand what a political cartoon is. Now, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, a political cartoon is a drawing and it often includes a caricature. And a caricature is an exaggerated image of some subject in the political cartoon. And as a whole, that caricature and the rest of the cartoon is meant to evoke conversation about politics, politicians, and current events. Now, that's not to say that those are the only subject categories for political cartoons. In fact, political cartoons often reference people, feelings, education, and historical events. The cartoon to the right of your screen is referencing education. If we look at this cartoon and we ask maybe a 7th grade student to tell us what they see, they'll say, I see a red book, maybe a red math book, a yellow science book, and a blue book. I see a red hat on a guy's head. He's also chewing gum and listening to music. He's not reading his book like the other two students are. The other two students have on glasses and white collar shirts and they're sitting at their desk. Now, that's a simple observation, but we want our students to think beyond what they see. That's very DOK level 1. We want to take them maybe to DOK level 3. Sorry. So we have to ask them a question similar to, why do you think the author made the student from China and India more studious than the student from the United States of America? Studious then becomes a challenging vocabulary word, and they might need to actually look that word up. And then they might start to think, well, maybe the author is saying that the student from China makes China a leader in math. The student from India makes India a leader in science. And the student from the United States is suffering in education because it's being influenced, or he's being influenced, by things like an MP3 player and fashion. Those are the types of educated observations that we want our students to make when they look at political cartoons. Now, in order to help them interpret the cartoons, there are 4 things that they need to consider. And those things are the author, the time period, and any wording, whether it's a caption or just a word somewhere on the cartoon that's not the author's name. And we also use the 5 W's. The 5 W's start with who, and who includes the author and the characters. As you can see on this page, the characters that I have are Abraham Lincoln, Barack Obama, and Pocahontas. They are all both historical figures and political figures, which makes them subject to political cartoon usage. And then the author. Where the author is from or who the author is definitely influences the artwork that they create. The second component is what. And the most major component of what is the symbols. The subject matter will come naturally, but the symbols are the most important thing to understand. If we take a look here at this image of Lady Liberty, we'll notice that a symbol being used is this army fatigue vest. So maybe there is some reference to the military. Okay? And then we also see that the body structure of Lady Liberty. In the facial structure, the head is tucked down in the vest. So then maybe Lady Liberty is scared. And if you look closely, Lady Liberty actually doesn't look quite like the lady. Looks like there may be some facial hair going on here. The bone structure is kind of strong. So maybe the military influence and the facial structure of Lady Liberty makes us think of something else. 2 other symbols to include would be the representations of the major political parties in the United States, which are these 2 animals, the donkey and the elephant. When students actually understand these 2 symbols, they are more likely to understand the cartoons in which they're being used because they use prior knowledge and relate them to something that they already know. The third W is where, and where the author is from and where is the location of the actual cartoon. Pretty self-explanatory. These are things to consider when you actually get this information to your students to use. Where the author is from definitely influences their exposure to the subject. A political cartoonist from Oklahoma will definitely see politics differently than a political cartoonist from New York. The fourth W is when, and this is the time period in which the cartoon was created. And cartoons made in retrospect, meaning they're made in the present day, but the issue occurred prior to. They're very different than cartoons that are more current. And it's because maybe that author wasn't actually around during the time of that cartoon. To put you in mind of an example, think of a cartoon referencing slavery. A political cartoonist born in 1995 has no idea what slavery was like, just inclinations based on history that he or she has studied. And lastly, you want to consider why. And the most important question for a student to ask himself is, what was the author's purpose? And we'll get to that in a second. So together, we're actually going to dissect a political cartoon and see what conclusions we can draw from what we see. Okay, so I'll give you a second to look at this. Now let's apply our who, what, where, when, and why skills. Who? The author is Drew Sheneman, and he is an American editorial cartoonist from New York. So he definitely has access to politics and the news from different political issues and social issues. And there are no people in the cartoon, so his subjects are strictly animals. Okay? What? The characters are two polar bears. The symbols are pretty simple, just the ocean, blocks of ice, and an iceberg. And an adult mind can tell that the subject matter is global warming, but a child's mind may not go there instantly. The location of the cartoon is in the middle of the ocean, and you can tell the cartoon was created in recent years because of the word hoax and the conversation between the two polar bears. And why? The author more than likely created this cartoon as a satire to get the attention of the general public. Now, when you put it all together, you want students to be able to draw conclusions based on how they got to their who, what, where, when, and why observations. If you look at this slide, it gives you a few clear inclinations about what we want the students to say or what we want them to have observed. Okay? Now, lastly, here is a graphic organizing tool, and you can have your students to actually put who, what, where, when, and why in these 5 boxes and to log what they've found as far as their details concerning each category. It's a very useful visual aid, and it helps the students to organize their thoughts. I hope that this presentation was helpful, and thank you for watching.